Hey everyone, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And this will be the fourth year in a row that I've done this since I've been more active on YouTube. Well, here's the 2021 version of the Calgary Flames Draft Recap, as I'll recap all the picks that the Calgary Flames have made at the 2021 anti-draft. And the other things that I like to do is throw in a couple bonus picks, because I usually like to take a look at picks that we traded away, see who they were used for, because you just never know what could happen. As well as a couple of Calgary Hitmen also got drafted, so we'll find out where they're going and who and where and all that. So, as I like to say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, just make sure you hit like and subscribe. But I'll bring up my notes and let's recap the 2021 draft class for the Calgary Flames. And what I'm going to say, this draft class will definitely be a lot of unknowns, because given the pandemic and all that, it's been hard to follow a lot of the prospects throughout the hockey world, and Flames definitely went a little all over the world with a few picks. But the 2021 pick draft will always be known as the Owen Power draft, as he was drafted first overall by the Buffalo Sabres, and then Matthew Beniers being the second overall pick, going to the Seattle Kraken, the first pick, and then the Mason McTavish, third overall, going to the Anaheim Ducks. So that was the top three. But coming into this draft, the Calgary Flames had the 13th overall pick, which technically was the 12th player that was selected, because the Arizona Coyotes, their own pick, 11th overall, was forfeited due to the combine violations. But the Calgary also had a second round pick in the 45th overall, and then they had a third round pick, 77th overall, and 84th overall. And then they did not have a fourth round pick because they traded away, and we'll talk about that. Then they had the fifth round pick in 141st overall. They had a sixth round pick, 173rd overall, and then they had a seventh round pick, 205th overall. But actually, the Calgary Flames made a trade in draft day where they picked up another draft pick. But let's talk about the whole class first. So the first round, obviously, that's where all the big spectacle is, happened on the Friday night. So the Calgary Flames, in the first round, they selected Matthew Coronato, a right winger, 13th overall, and he played out Chicago USHL, the Chicago Steel, in the United States Hockey League. Apparently, he was on the team that won the Clark Cup, and he is an American from New York. So, and apparently he was nicknamed Bison for Matthew Coronato. So, based on his pedigree that we hear, this could be someone that we could like to see down the road. It's going to at least be a couple years before Matthew Coronato would be technically going on the Calgary Flames roster, because apparently here he is committed to go to Harvard. But they nicknamed him Bison, and looking at his pedigree and his numbers that he put up in USHL, I would say this could definitely be someone that we definitely need on the right side. If you look at the Flames organization, I think we're definitely weaker on the right side, and we got too much on the left side. And I'm not just talking about politics, but we definitely have a lot more natural left wingers, but we need some more right wingers. And I still think he's a couple years away if he's committed to go to Harvard. So he definitely has, some goal scoring touch, some grit, and some brains. Apparently, if he is going to Harvard, be interested to see if we'll eventually have a line with Connor Zary at center, with Jacob Pelche and Matthew Coronato. So that was the first round pick for the Calgary Flames. So going back to the next draft on Saturday, where rounds 2 through 7 happened, the second round pick that the Calgary Flames made, 45th overall. This time they went over to Sweden, as they picked a Swede in William Strogan, a left winger. He played at Rogel Swede Jr. So this is definitely a taller winger that we picked out of Sweden. Don't know much about what his pedigree is, and same with many of these players that we drafted this year, because it was definitely very, very limited to watch, any junior prospects around the hockey world. I mean, the Western Hockey League barely had a season. The Ontario Hockey League did not have a season, and same with the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. And overseas, everything was all messed up, so we definitely had to count on our scouting team a lot more. So the second pick was William Strogan. So now the third pick, going into the third round, this was 77th overall. This was also Calgary's own pick. They went to the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. We drafted a center, a Canadian, and Cole Hopkins, who played at Athletic Baskers of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. So right now we got 2 wings and center so far, who we drafted in the 2021 class. So that is the 3rd pick. And then the Calgary Flames, well, coming into this draft, they had the 84th overall pick, and that pick originally was come from the Edmonton Oilers, and that was that pick that we picked up with Milan Lucic in the James Neal trade. But the Calgary Flames actually made a trade at the draft as they traded that 84th overall pick, and they traded that to the Los Angeles Kings. So then they moved down to the 89th overall, and then they picked up another 6th round pick, 168th overall. So that's ultimately what happened to that pick that we got from the Edmonton Oilers, is we traded that to the Los Angeles Kings, and we'll touch on what that pick got used for. And apparently the pick that we got from the Los Angeles Kings, actually that pick originally belonged to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and Los Angeles got that in the Jack Campbell trade. So with that pick that the Calgary Flames moved down to pick up a 6th round pick, so 89th overall, definitely an interesting name, as we drafted once again to the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. We drafted Cameron Wynot, a defenseman from Halifax from the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, which is the pick that we got from the Los Angeles Kings when we moved down. So I guess, that said itself, why not? Pick Cameron Wynot, so that's who we drafted, and he's also a Canadian. Actually, we drafted a bunch of Canadians before we ended off with a Russian, when you look at the picks that we made. So that was the 3rd round pick, 4th player that we picked, and then we did not have a pick in the 4th round because we traded that pick away to the Los Angeles Kings at the trade deadline back in 2020, which I'm going to still say that felt like that was 8 years ago, for Derek Forbert. So we didn't have anything in the 4th round, so our next pick didn't come until the 5th round, as it was our own pick, 141st overall. We went a little closer to home for this pick, as we drafted Cole Jordan, the defenseman who played at the Moose Jaw Warriors in the Western Hockey League. I said he's a Canadian, so we picked up another defenseman in this draft. So now going into the 6th round, now we have 2 picks in the 6th round, our own and that pick that we acquired from the Los Angeles Kings. Well, the next player we selected in the 168th overall, and that was that extra pick that we got when we traded away the 84th overall pick. We drafted a right winger in Jack Beck, a Canadian who plays at the Ottawa of the Ontario Hockey League. So we picked a player that didn't play last year, mentions Ottawa for the Ontario Hockey League, didn't know where he played last year. So then the next pick, which was 173rd overall, this was our own pick. Once again, we stayed fairly close to home as we picked up another player that came from the Western Hockey League and was a Canadian left winger in Lucas Fiona. He played with the Seattle Thunderbirds in the Western Hockey League. And then the last pick that the Calgary Flames made, so they picked 8 players overall in this draft. They actually picked up yet another goalie overseas for the 205th overall pick. We picked a Russian, and Arseny Sergeyev, a goaltender, who actually he played at the Shreveport in the North American Hockey League. So picked up another goalie late overseas. So we'll definitely see how this pans out. And as always, you could say with any draft class, you don't really know how good or bad you've done until a few years out. I mean, it's going to take at least 5 years to know if any of these players pan out, but I'm going to say based on the players, and some pundits even said, Matthew Coronato, some had him around that area where the Calgary Flames picked him, and actually some NHL mock drafts actually had him picked where we picked him, so we weren't too far off. Didn't go too off the board. Basically, it looked like we picked up a lot more forwards and a couple defensemen, but I do not think any of these players that we picked are going to be in training camp this October, which is coming pretty soon. But what do you think of the picks that we have selected? I definitely liking the William Coronato based on his pedigree and what he's doing, but got to remember these are all teenagers and still kids and still get to develop. And then this past year definitely was a lot more skewed with the pandemic. So the other parts of the video that I do with my draft recap is, let's take a look at some of the players that we traded away and what they were used for. So that pick that we picked up from the Edmonton Oilers that ultimately we shipped off to the Los Angeles Kings, they actually drafted Kirill Kasanov, a Russian defenseman. That's who the Los Angeles Kings picked up as a defenseman. That was the pick that we traded to Los Angeles to get the 89th and 168th picks, so that kind of completes that trade. And then the 109th overall pick in the 4th round that we traded away for Derek Forbert at the trade deadline back in 2020. Ultimately, it was the Carolina Hurricanes that got that pick because they traded. Los Angeles Kings wound up trading that pick to Carolina at the draft yesterday. So ultimately, it was Carolina that got that pick, and they drafted, I believe he's an American, a right winger in Jackson Blake. So that was all the picks that we traded away. Just a curiosity to know what happened to them, what they turned out to be. So that's just something to look back on down the road, and that's the beauty of making these videos. But then the last part is 2 Calgary Hitmen actually got drafted in this draft. So congratulations to the couple of Calgary Hitmen that got drafted. You had to wait till the 5th round for the Calgary Hitmen players that got drafted. So the first Calgary Hitman that got drafted was 130th overall, and that was by the Anaheim Ducks, and Sean Tessier, the left winger, got drafted by Anaheim from the Calgary Hitmen. And then the second Calgary Hitmen player that got drafted was also in the 5th round. 105th overall was defenseman Tyson Galloway, as he is property of the St. Louis Blues. So congratulations to the 2 Calgary Hitmen that got drafted, and there were no other local Calgary players outside the Calgary Hitmen that got drafted in this draft. I know that a couple years ago when I did this draft recap, there was someone that got drafted from a Calgary-based team in the Alberta Junior Hockey League, but I know that the Edmonton Oil Kings up the road, they definitely had a couple players that got selected in the 1st round, as they were a strong team in terms of Dylan Gunther and goaltender Sebastian Casa. So, but yeah, that's the draft picks for the Calgary Flames. What do you think of the draft class, and what do you think of the Calgary Hitmen players that got drafted as well, and what do you think about the whole NHL entry draft in general that for this season? It was definitely a lot more challenging to follow more of these prospects, just given the nature of everything that's been going on. And once again, this draft was done virtually, where everything was based out of the NHL Network studios, and Gary Bettman going to the podium, said this team now selects, and then they go to that team, and that team has a representative, their general manager, or whoever makes the pick, and then you see that, live in someone's house when that player got drafted. So that's the case with the draft again this year, just like last year. Not done in normal circumstances because of what's been going on, but hopefully next year in 2022, the hope is that the NHL draft will be back in its traditional form. They say it'll be in Montreal at the Bell Center, and I think that's when Montreal was supposed to get the draft live till everything happened, and then hopefully be back in the regular June. So anyway, like I say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, home the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, Stampeders, and mostly do talk Calgary sports for recap games and stories, and been a lot more stories recently with the Spanish draft with the Seattle Kraken, and now the entry draft. And then later this week, where free agent frenzy begins, I'll plan to make videos on that, but I won't be until probably the long weekend. I'll have more time, and I am taking a couple extra days off from work to be able to make a few videos if necessary. But I also do a variety of non-sports content like personal vlogs, attempt comedy, and I also do share my experiences when I'm on the road. We're at a sport event, and I've done some vlogging on the go, but I think I'm going to be a lot more busier with Calgary Flames and NHL content, and then as well next month, CFL season finally begins, and Calgary Stampeders and my Calgary Stampeders. This month it's going to return, so as I say, if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, do follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey. You know what you do, just make sure you hit like and subscribe. I also have my other social media links down in the description below. So I'm going to say, welcome to the Sea of Red, to the 8 new players that we drafted in the NHL. Hopefully all pan out and play great for the Calgary Flames, and ultimately get us that dream to win the Stanley Cup, right? We can dream, right? It's been at least over 32 years, at least for the Calgary Flames, that we've hosted the Stanley Cup. And just, all the players that got drafted, and definitely we'll be interested to see how they pan out, given the circumstances. So as I say, go Flames go. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.